I'm Erica.
And I'm CJ.
And you're listening to the Her Podcast. This episode is sponsored by Ashley Breland, the Boundary Therapist, and Breland Counseling. Today's episode is an incredibly special one as we're joined by the one and the only Alicia Mccarvell, a content creator and a passionate advocate for self-love and body positivity. Alicia's journey into the world of content creation is not just about sharing workout routines and dance videos. It's about embracing humor, breaking down barriers around body image, worth, and self-love. In our conversation today, we honestly went all over the place. It was a bit of a surprise and we loved it. We got into why getting on a plane gives her so much anxiety. She shares tips for those who are plus size on how to ease that anxiety, how her and her husband often receive backlash due to societal beauty standards, how she balances using humor while addressing serious conversations around body image and self-worth, and so much more. This is a good one, you guys. You're going to want to turn it up. Let's welcome Alicia to the podcast.
These Air Maxes with the noise canceling in them have been incredible for my flight anxiety, like flying, because you can literally just hit a button and it cancels out the sound of the airplane. Like you can't, it's outrageous actually how well they work.
I want to ask you about your flight anxiety. Okay.
Yeah.
Because I would say I don't like flying, but I wouldn't like classify myself with anxiety about it. But I'm curious, when did that start for you?
Oh, okay. So, I mean, I think people sometimes forget that up until Scott and I were 29, 30, like 4 years ago, like we had no money. Like we had flown to Toronto a few times together, and the furthest we had ever been was Vegas together once. So I had flown maybe 3 or 4 times before these last 4 years. So I was an anxious flyer then, like needed gravel to like knock myself out so that I could just sleep the whole way. And then for me, like it's a mixture of a little bit of everything, like being in a fat body in a plane that's not built for fat bodies adds just an extra layer of like anxiety when traveling. When I travel with Scott, he's super aware of that stuff, so he always lets me sit in by the window. When we get out of our seats to leave the plane, he takes a step back so that I can gather my stuff and walk out in front of him rather than like leave me there to like fumble in front of other people. And there's just like little things like that that are out of my control that I think drive me to the point where I'm like thinking about it all night, can't sleep before I fly. Still do fly because I love the outcome of flying so much.
Yeah.
However, this last trip was a lot for me. Like it was 5.5 hours by myself.
Yeah.
And I think the lady could sense how uncomfortable I was because I was like, I'm just gonna buy the seat beside me. If there's no way to like upgrade me, then I'll just buy the seat beside me. And she was like, well, I don't think I'm gonna make you do that. And I was like, you're not making me do anything. I was like, I'm telling you that I would feel a lot better if I didn't have anybody beside me. And she was like, let me see if I can make it work. Bless her whole heart, she made it work. And then I got sat, and then on this last flight, I got sat by the sweetest old man that's ever old man in his life. And he was like, I wonder if anybody's going to sit between us. And I was like, well, I have a little bit of flight anxiety. And I told the stewardess that, and I think she like finagled it so that nobody would be beside us. And he was like, oh, and then he like stopped and went about his business. And then he turned back and he was like, is there anything I can do for you on takeoff and landing that'll make you feel a little bit better? And I was like, no, you're so sweet, as I'm holding my noise canceling headphones. And then I put them on. He was having troubles with his like technology, so he'd like reach over and get me to like help him. And then at the end of the flight, he was like, is this your last stop? And I was like, no. I was like, but I have a friend on my next flight. And he was like, you had a friend on this flight too. I was like,
oh my God. It's like Hallmark movie.
He was literally the sweet. He was exactly what I needed. like genuinely on that flight. He was so helpful. He just was very, very kind. And then of course we're leaving the plane, and what does he do but take a step back for me to gather
Oh.
my stuff so I could walk out ahead of him. And I was like, I don't think you truly understand like how happy that like truly made me. But yeah, so I think it's always been there, but I just never flown. So when people are like, oh, you're 34 and you have flight anxiety and you're flying all the time, and I'm like, well, I mean, I didn't start flying until I was 30 years old, like realistically, consistently, and never by myself. I've had the privilege of always having Scott or someone I know with me for my flights. So, and yeah, and being, like I said, being fat in spaces that are not made for fat people, like asking for my seatbelt extender as I get on the plane is like something that I've tried to share with other people, because you wouldn't be surprised the amount of fat people who don't wear a seatbelt on a plane because they're too afraid to ask for a seatbelt. Like we'll
Oh, that's
pretend like
so
it's
interesting.
Why
we'll
can't they just
pretend like
well, why can't
why
they just
can't
like put it in the seat, like in that little, like they have a little net
there's
there with
so
like your puke
many.
bag and all that stuff, like the flight
You could literally
menus.
request it on your ticket. You could request it on your ticket. It could be on your seat there.
Yeah.
Sometimes, and like it's hard too because they obviously don't have training, and like this is something I had to explain to the stewardess on my last flight. Obviously, my flight where I have the worst anxiety. I'm like, can I get my seatbelt extender? And she's like, well, I'll bring it to you in your seat. And I'm like, I appreciate that. However, I can't get into my seat without connecting my seatbelt together, or else I have to sit up in order to get the seatbelt, because genuinely the one side of the seatbelt barely fits over my right thigh. And like it's like this much that it doesn't fit, but in order to get the seatbelt extender connected, you can't be in the seat. And she was like, oh, I didn't realize that. I was like, yes. So if you have people who ask for their seatbelt extenders at the door, it would be really helpful if you could just get them their seatbelt extenders at the door. Plus, people don't like being in a row of strangers being like, can I get a seatbelt extender? Because whether we think it or not, a lot of people are judging that the minute it comes out of your mouth, and like you just feel that. So yeah, it's a mixture of a little bit of everything. Like I said, not flying for years, and then never flying by myself, and then being plus size in spaces that just are not meant for plus size people, and like it's not one that I'm familiar enough without having support from somebody else. Like Scott goes above and beyond to like make me comfortable in that space, and so when I'm traveling by my own, I can't even get out of my own way to like support that properly for myself yet. But I did pretty good, so it wasn't so bad. And then the world sent me the sweetest little old man, so he was a gem. So I'm sure he was never going to listen to this, but if he ever does, he was my whole experience that day. So he was definitely what I needed.
That's so cute. And I love that because, again, and it's like the most common message in the world, which is you just never know who you're talking to or what day they're having. And your small act of kindness, which really takes almost zero effort, can make such an impact. And you're still talking about it now, right? Like it's not even just like that day you were like, wow, that was really helpful. You're like, this impacted me and impacted the
like
way
I could just
my trip went.
I could feel my face like slowly gaining back its color. Like I must have just been red the whole time. And like just as he was speaking to me, I just was like getting calmer and calmer and calmer. And I don't even know if he even necessarily realized it, but he was genuinely wonderful. So yeah. But a lot of people have flight anxiety. Like I get a lot of people DMing me to talk about, like, I mean, flying is so funny to me because most people are flying for exciting things. Like we'll say those that aren't flying for business, most people are flying on vacations or to visit people they love, but it's such a high stakes, high anxiety space to be. Like even if you're traveling for enjoyment, we walk into the airport and we're already thinking about everything that could possibly go wrong. Are our bags going to get there? Am I going to make my flight? Is the flight going to be overbooked? Like it's just we're already thinking about that stuff. So I try to be as much of a joy in that space as I possibly can, because I know I can't even imagine being like a stewardess or like the customer service for any flight, anything
Well, I mean,
right now,
there's
because
just like
just
so much energy, like compacted into one space and even into an airport, right? Which is insane. And like the smallness for me, it hits me with the claustrophobicness. Like I just feel like there's so many, like it feels like so tight of a space, and yeah, it's a lot of energy to deal with.
Yeah, my dad doesn't fly for that specific reason. And then, yeah, like it's high stakes. You're like traveling to see people you love. If that gets bumped by a day, like that's time off work. There's just people's emotions are already so naturally high in the setting that, yeah, for me, I find it like, yeah, it was good. It wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be, but we got there like to the airport, and Scott like got me out of the car, got my bags, and he was like, well, don't get in anybody's way. And I was like, what? What does that mean? But he meant it like, because that's what heightens that's what makes me feel anxious, is that if I'm in space, like, and I get like, I just feel like I take on too much space. And I was like, I think we're trying to be nice there, but that's not at all that came out. But yeah, so it wasn't too bad.
I will be honest, I had not thought about before for you when you are getting on a plane. And I would actually love to hear from you, give you the opportunity to share with us other areas in life that are actually, either like anxiety inducing or stress inducing, or like things that, we don't necessarily think about that need to be addressed and changed for people to be able to feel confident in.
To be honest, you don't really know what spaces need to have that until you're walking into them for the very first time. And I really didn't realize that about being on a plane until I was, too big to fit in a seatbelt. And like that feels like a life altering moment. And the emotions that come along with that are super, super valid. So for a plane specifically, like there's lots of ways to obviously accommodate it, but like there's just little things. And I think for me, I don't need to tell like the airlines that they need bigger seats. Like they're well aware of that. That's not going to change overnight. But I think for me, like little things like getting the seatbelt extender when it's asked for immediately on the airplane is super important, because yes, it seems like it's more convenient for you to wait until people are in their seats, but it's less convenient for me as a fat person to have to get back up, shuffle around while I'm already in a tight space, to put my seatbelt extender on, then to sit down. And then you don't have to hand me a seatbelt extender across 6 people in front of everybody. I've had the privacy to ask for that, because as much as I am confident in my body and confident in myself to know that like asking for a seatbelt is my safety. Like I deserve that safety on an airplane. Not everybody is at that point. So and I have received multiple DMs from people saying that they just don't buckle up. Like they just make it look like they're buckled on a plane when they're not, because they don't fit the seatbelt and they're too ashamed to ask for one. And like, how sad is it that people are too afraid to advocate for their own safety because they're embarrassed of something like that? And yeah, that one specifically hit home for me, because when I started traveling, I just started sharing. Like these are the planes that I fit into the seats. These are the planes I don't fit into the seats. These are the places I need, but these are where you can get your own seatbelt extender. A lot of people will buy their own on Amazon and travel with it themselves, so they don't even have to ask, because most of them are universal. So there are a few places that you can get it. Shopping is another experience where I think people forget how unaccommodating it is for those living in a fat body. And I deal with it on a regular basis when dealing with like brands or shoots or things like that. For instance, I'm doing a shoot with one of my brands in Newfoundland this coming week, and in order for me to order clothes to be in that shoot, I don't have the luxury of just hopping on Amazon all of the time to find something that can be delivered in 3 days. Often I have to shop on specific websites that are not Canadian, that take 3 to 4 weeks to even ship and reach me in order to get into what is going to match the theme of what's happening. So for instance, we were looking for a purple snowsuit for the shoot, and we even 4 weeks out, I was like, there's no way in hell you're going to find a plus size purple snowsuit. Like that's just not going to be a thing for me. And I can tell you that already. Like we're going to have to navigate how to change that. So like the shopping experience, but like that, I think that's a very obvious one. Like, I think that that's the one that people talk about the most. We have a really, really beautiful shop here in Halifax called Incandescent, and it is a plus size shop that carries smaller sizes also. And 2 summers ago was the very first time that I've ever gone into a store with my junior high best friend and shopped in the same place, went into the same change rooms, tried on clothes that were the same, because that's the other thing. Typically, plus size clothing is different than a straight size clothing. So you're like not even dealing with the same t-shirts or the same shorts. And it was truly like the first time 2 years ago. I was 32 years old. And that was the first time I'd ever walked into a store with my best friend since junior high and been able to shop with her at the same place. And so yeah, so shopping obviously I think is a a really big one. Sports centers, stadiums, that can be a pretty like anxiety. It's not like the amusement parks where they often have seats outside where you can go and try them to see if you even fit in them. Sports stadiums don't have that. My Scotiabank Center here in Halifax, like I fit in the seats, but it's uncomfortable for me. Like it's not a comfortable experience for me to pay. So when I'm going to see things and I'm paying, $100 for a ticket to sit in a seat, like it's not an accommodating experience for me. But yeah, like there's a lot. There's a lot of places where it is uncomfortable to exist in. And like we're not just talking spaces that are naturally not accommodating. Like sometimes it's uncomfortable for me to walk into a fast food restaurant. Like sometimes it's uncomfortable for me to be in spaces. I would used to walk through the grocery store and I'd make Scott carry anything that could be viewed as unhealthy, and I carried all the healthy food when I walked to the grocery store. So there's lots of spaces that just don't feel safe sometimes. But I do genuinely think that the generation of people that are a part of my social media community now and have been a part of it are the ones that are really making a lot of change right now, in terms of like not even changing things or like establishments or the seat sizes, or they're just more confident to ask for what they deserve. And like I think that that's probably what I'm most proud of with the platform, is that like I'll get a DM from a follower saying I asked for my seatbelt extender on my flight today. Like I could cry on how easy that went, asking at the door rather than waiting until I got to my seat. Or like people just talking about how they increased their size in something so that they didn't have to feel uncomfortable anymore, and like their uniform that they were wearing at work because they were too afraid to ask their boss to increase their sizing because they were embarrassed about having that conversation. Like just little things like that. And yeah, so there's a lot of spaces, but I think my view on it isn't really challenging those spaces. It's more so challenging my community to speak up, to ask for, and to demand the things that they deserve within those spaces.
I'm really curious then, because you touched on it now with your platform, and you said like what you love about your platform is obviously people who are reaching out to you, and your platform kind of exploded.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm wondering if you can just like speak to that a little bit. What was the thing? Because I feel like that, like, right, what was kind of the catalyst for your platform?
100%. So like, I mean, what the catalyst was in my life was that I had been working for a fitness company for years, and I lost my job with that company. I was almost 8 years. And then my divisional manager walked in one day and was like, your club's changing to this. You're no longer going with it. See you later. And it was like a very big moment in my life to realize how much of my life I had truly devoted to my job and not the people that I love. And how much I had used my job as this kind of cape for my life. Like I just kind of hidden behind it. So I took some time off, and while I took some time off, I really got back to like the roots of my creativity, the things that I love to do. I got an Apple Pencil and an iPad, and I started doing digital drawings and selling them. I started commissioning resin coasters, resin magnets. I was going to little gift shops on the weekends and setting up a little table and craft shows. And then with that came TikTok.
Question for you guys. How do you feel about boundaries? Are you for them, against them? Do you struggle setting them or even respecting them? I won't lie, whenever the conversation turns to boundaries, I get slightly uncomfortable, and that's because I suck at setting them and I'm even worse at keeping them. This has always been a struggle for me, and for the longest time, I just didn't know how to navigate them. That wasn't until we sat down with Ashley Breland right here on the Her Podcast. If you listened to episode 35, then you heard our conversation with Ashley, who's known as the boundary therapist, and you got to hear all about the impactful work she does with clients around boundary work, and you likely learned a lot, like I did, about how to set boundaries, different types of boundaries, and the challenges we all face setting and maintaining them. If you listen to the episode and want more from Ashley, then you're in luck. What you may not know is that Ashley founded Breland Counseling and Support. And along with her team, they are expanding the practice, taking on new clients and offering incredible services to you so you can find support to care for yourself and your mental health in a safe and inclusive space. The team at Breland Counseling are committed to meeting people where they're at with unwavering care, compassion, and respect. They provide an incredible space designed with you in mind for all bodies to feel comfortable, safe, and welcome, allowing you to feel supported in sharing and leaving you feeling seen, heard, and understood. Breland Counseling is a fat-positive, body-inclusive, and anti-diet practice. The team practices from a lens of body neutrality to promote mindful awareness of one's body. They work to assist folks to decrease body judgment, positive or negative, and focus on supporting folks to see themselves beyond their bodies. The team offers therapeutic services to Saskatchewan residents in person at the Breland Counseling offices, virtually and over the phone, in-home and on-site. You can find Breland Counseling and Support on Instagram at Breland Counseling. That's BRELANDCOUNSELLING, and online at brelandcounseling.ca, where you can book in online with the team and find the type of session that supports you best. We will link all of the information in on our show notes for you to easily find.
So I was obviously on the app watching other people create and creating on my own. And one day there was a sound that was, my boyfriend is 10 times hotter than me, check. And then after that portion of it, it was like montage of photos of the boyfriend and the girlfriend, or the partner and the partner. And I was looking at it, and by beauty standards, the couples that had been posting to this sound were your traditional, to paint a picture, quarterback football player and cheerleading captain, like just to paint the stereotypical picture of what I'm talking about and where these people fell on the beauty standards of this society. Those were the people who were posting this. And then in the comment section were people being like, no, her forehead's too big. No, there's a gap in her teeth. No, he's not as muscly as he should be. No, he's smaller than her. All of this stuff was coming through, and I'm like looking through this, and I'm like, what is wrong with all of you? Like, genuinely, what is wrong with all of you that you think that someone's gap between their teeth is enough to decide like their attractiveness or what they deserve or who they should be with or who is more attractive? And I remember I was fuming. I was like, okay, well, like, if you want to see a couple that by beauty standards doesn't make sense, I'll fucking show you one. So I did the sound. At this point, Scott and I were married, and I changed the boyfriend part to my boyfriend's 10 times hotter. And I just like put a asterisk husband is 10 times. And I fully, wholeheartedly exploited him. It was me being fat in the front. I think I was working my part-time job at this point, and like just me like green screened to photos of him in the back with his shirt off, and me being like, okay, like by beauty standards, my boyfriend is 10 times harder than me. Check, here you go. If you want to talk about somebody, like, let's talk about somebody that by beauty standards falls into this category. Like, let's not belittle people. Like, so I knew what I was doing when I posted it, but it was only my third video. So I was like, who knows what will happen? But then it gained some traction. I remember texting Scott being like, this is going to blow up. And then I was at work and my sister was like, oh my gosh, it's at 100,000 views. Oh my gosh, it's at 200,000 views. And then I think it ended up hitting, I think now it's like at 7 million views, which is like low compared to some of my viral videos now, but at the time I think it like died down at 1.1 million views. And we woke up and we had close to like 56,000 people following. I had gone from 10 followers to like 56,000 people. And I remember thinking, holy crap, there's more to this than I think. And I was reading the comments in the video, and sure, there was Brandon telling me that I'm too fat to be with him. And there was, these
Sorry,
other
it's just
comments.
the name Brandon. It's like Brandon.
Yeah, Brandon's always my go-to. And then there were people saying, I don't feel equal to my partner either, but we work, we make sense, like we're valuable. And there was far more people looking for representation than I had ever imagined there being. And that's the video that really set it off. Scott and I just originally joked about, like, okay, well, we have to take this seriously. Like, let's see what happens. Let's start sharing. And at that point in my life, I had lost my long-term job. I had gone back to like being creative. I was just had started a full-time job to pay my bill, to help pay my bills, because I could no longer do that with what I was doing. And I was like, if I don't try this now, like what? I'll never know if I have a career in social media or being a content creator. Like I'll never know. So we kind of built ourselves a pillar system, laying in bed.
Yeah, because I'm
And
like,
just,
how do you go from having a video, that gets to like 1 million views, and this is like your third video, right? And then being like,
Yeah.
what do I post? Like, I would imagine the pressure.
Well, and I think so. CJ and I, this is funny because I feel like I'd call you a unicorn. So we own, and in the best possible sense. So we own a social media management business, and all the time people are like, I just need my video to go viral. I just need my video to go viral. And we often come in maybe as a little bit of a dark cloud and being like, okay, just because your video goes viral, like unless it's something that's in your niche or whatever, right? Like it does have the potential to do something for your brand, but also it could just be a one-off. But you actually had this happen. You're like, I had a video go viral, and it kind of like cracked open my life a little bit.
Yeah. And we literally were just when it happened, we were going through the comment section together, just like picking apart like what people were looking for, what they were resonating with, what story I had to tell, like what other story I felt valuable, like what I wanted my voice to be. But I also know enough about social media and know enough about business to know that I didn't want to pigeonhole myself into one specific thing. I didn't want to just be the fat woman with a hot husband. Like I wanted to have a bigger conversation than that. So we decided our pillars in bed, and then we have just since that day only created within the realm of those pillars. And
Can I
that
ask
falls,
what the pillars are?
yeah. So our relationship, obviously, like we're high school sweethearts, like we've been together for 17 years. It's a very long time. It's a very unique experience, but are a lot of people out there that are very similar to us, a lot of people who look like us that have a very similar story to us too, which I think says a lot to do with society and how men and women are kind of shaped into what they should and shouldn't like. But when you find that at 15, you're so naive, like you haven't really been impacted by all of those things. So we decided we would share our relationship. Scott decided reluctantly that we would share our relationship. I've always believed I was funny, so I wanted to bring comedy to a conversation that can be typically pretty tough for people. I wanted to talk about self-love because at this point in my journey, I had some pretty impactful moments before social media that allowed me to be a strong enough person to continue through the crap that had come when I had posted that video. I wanted to talk about movement and learning how to move my body for ways that I liked and not ways that society told me I had to move my body as a fat person. And I wanted everything to be authentic. I didn't want to just show up on my good days. I wanted to make sure that I showed myself in my pajamas, in my pimple patches, crying, celebrating, learning, growing, apologizing, and being myself from right away. And then we've just kind of run with those, and anything that we do has to fall in that. So like for instance, if I work with a brand, so like McDonald's wanted a Halloween concept. So what I did for my Halloween concept had to fall within one of those. So we did a comedy sketch. So it was a comedy sketch that fell within the realm of those 5 pillars. If we did I did an ad with Dove. So my Dove ad fell within the self-love pillar. So I talked about my relationship with my body when I did that one specifically. And then if I get a brand that I can't really put into any of those pillars, then that's not necessarily a brand that I work with. So that's kind of helped me on a business standpoint, but also on diversifying the things that I can talk about in my space, which has allowed me to attract more people than just the my husband is hot conversation.
Which I think is so interesting because, and maybe you need to give us a little bit of backstory, because I'm like the average person, and maybe I'm just like unaware, but people that we talk to, you know, I feel like if this happened, they wouldn't be like, okay, I'm going to get in bed with my husband and talk about my content pillars, you know? And so I'm curious, like what your backstory is in either like marketing or business, or just like how, and maybe you use the word content pillars from the beginning, but I think it's important because I think a lot of people think I want to go viral on social, but then don't know what the next steps are. And you kind of actually did, which is really cool. And so I'm curious how you knew what to do.
So, I mean, I've always been, I'm the type of person that is the level of delusional that I think that I truly can do anything if I put my mind to it. Like I truly do believe that. I get I get that from my parents, and I sometimes think they forget where I get that, because my parents are people who didn't have a lot, who have worked very hard to give us everything, to help us pay for a university degree, help us go to school. So they were very much university degree, go to school, do this. And I am their child through and through. I got into my first 3 years of university, hated every minute of it, dropped out to become a sales associate for Good Life Fitness. And that was when I was like, I can do this. I can make way more money doing this. I have a passion like for helping people. I want to be in front of people. I can do this. I had to put together like a little business portfolio to show my parents that I was going to be able to pay off my university debt. Also, by doing this, that I was no longer passionate about this, what the dollar value was going to be of what I was going to make versus I had to do the same thing when I bought my first car and asked them to co-sign on it. So I think I've always had a very like big picture type of view on like my life. But when I worked for Good Life Fitness, I went from working in the daycare center to quitting university, becoming a fitness advisor, to an assistant general manager, to a general manager, to a training associate, and all within the span of those 8 years. I went to probably the top 500 for the company 6 of the 8 years that I was there. I don't think I went the first 2 years that I was there. And they're a very business oriented company. So sales goals, tactics, etc. But I've always believed that I was a leader. I've always believed that I was supposed to be in front of people, helping people do something bigger than themselves. So pillars is something that I used as a manager, and something that I actually came up with as a manager, were what my pillars were with my people. So how I wanted my people to view me as a leader, which was my pillars, which would be my foundation for a strong club or a strong like leadership team. So I came up with my pillars when I was like there as a leader of what type of leader I wanted to be. And then when everything happened, I was like, well, my pillars worked well for me as a leader. This is no different. I'd be like essentially leading a community of people, like-minded people. What do I want those people to be here for? What do I want to bring to the table for the people that come here? And it just kind of naturally fit. But I learned a lot in my 8 years, like running clubs and working with you don't really realize how much you truly do learn, especially in customer service. And I truly believe that in everything that is good about who I am under pressure, or in moments of like in shitty moments or in good moments, comes from I worked at Tim Hortons for 4 years. And I was a supervisor there, and I loved the work that I did there. I loved being the first person people saw in the morning, the first person the last person they saw before they went home in the evening. And I didn't take that lightly. And that itself translates into my social media too. Like, I know that some days I'm the first person people see when they wake up in the morning, when they open their phone. I know I'm the last person they see before they close their eyes going to bed. So like, what kind of impact do I want to leave on them? So it's not necessarily like a traditional education that I think has helped me run it like a business. I think it's just my experience, like, as a leader in my other positions, but also my customer service experience that has allowed me to kind of treat this like, these are my customers. I am my brand. Like, my brand is my product, and who I am is my product. And like, those pillars really allowed me to be like, what is my product that I'm going to be like giving to people, and what type of customer do I want to really attract? And that separating myself and treating this like a business is what has allowed me to get through a lot of the crap that comes along with being a content creator, because I don't like everybody else's product. Like, not everybody's products for me. I'm going to walk by multiple products in a store every single day that I'm not going to ever purchase. That doesn't mean I don't like them. That doesn't mean they don't hold value in somebody else's life. It's just not a product that's for me. So as a recovering people pleaser, I truly view myself as a product. So, and it allows me to give myself grace when people walk by my product and just choose not to buy it or choose not to be a part of it. So yeah, nothing traditional, just kind of my own experience. And then we truly did run with it. Like, we started creating almost every single day right away. And really bought into like what people were looking for, like answering questions that followers were asking, and like spending time in our DMs to see what people were looking for. And it just kind of obviously catapulted from there, and it just has continued with a steady growth on both TikTok and Instagram.
Well, and you just touched on something, the people pleasing, that I think is, I mean, I feel like everyone could probably be like, I'm a recovering people pleaser, or I am a people pleaser. And I think it looks different to so many people. Like, and I know, like, for me, I'm a pretty big people pleaser when it comes to my family. But when it comes to people who maybe are outside of my sphere, I'm like, not as much. Right. So I'm curious if you can speak to what it looked like when you were a people pleaser, and maybe some of the tangible tools, or I don't know, little things you did to be able to say, I'm in recovery from it. Like, here's the steps I took, because this is, I think, a big thing. Well, especially going into like, we're going into holiday season, when I feel like everyone is like, well, we just got to do what we got to do because this is traditions and this is Christmas and this is, we forget that we still have agency over our decisions and over what we want to do.
Yeah, I am a recovering people pleaser, and I say that because again, being in a fat body, or being the fat friend, I didn't really have the luxury of not being the people pleaser. I felt I was so unvaluable in certain situations that in order to be valuable, I did anything that everybody asked of me, whether that was curling people's hair, whether that was taking the photos, whether that was, doing things that necessarily didn't align with, who I was, going to bars and waiting in lines while my friends skipped them. Just, I was always that person. And I think for me, it does definitely probably look a little bit different than a lot of people, but I know that other people who are the fat friend can relate to being a people pleaser, because I genuinely didn't see my value outside of showing up for everybody all of the time. And if I didn't do that, what was my value? Because I wasn't the pretty one. I wasn't the smartest one. I wasn't the richest one. I was the fat one. So if I could make myself be the person that said yes to everything and supported everybody, then I could at least fly under the radar. I was at least valuable in that way. Then when you realize that that your body is not why you are valuable, and how you look is not why you're valuable, then I was like, shit, I've been doing a lot of work for free. I've been doing a lot of fucking shit for free. I've been showing up for a lot of people who have never returned the favor. I've been doing a lot for a lot of people who wouldn't do the same for me. And that is very eye-opening when you're like, holy crap, like this is actually how valuable I am. This is the dollar work that I've been doing. Those don't match. And there's obviously a ton of work that has gone into getting to this point. But something tangible for me is realizing that nobody is going to be as bought into your success, into your happiness than you are. Nobody else is going to be. We're all self-centered, and that is not a bad thing. We are all thinking about ourselves or thinking about what other people are thinking about us. So either way, we're still thinking about us. And nobody is going to be bought into that as you are. So when people from the outside are saying things like, you should do this, you should do it, even though they think it's best for you, it's coming from them. It's coming from what they think is best for you, not what they think you deserve or you should be doing or what is best. It's a completely different motive. Um, and I've had a lot of experience with that because I don't want children. And that's another topic I'm sure we can talk about, but I don't want kids. And I've had to spend a lot of time tiptoeing around that conversation with people that I love because I didn't want to hurt their feelings or I didn't want them to be upset with the decision for me not to have kids. And then one day I had to say, we're not talking about this anymore. Like, I'm not having children. I don't want to talk about it at every family event. Every time I don't take a drink of alcohol or every time I do drink alcohol, I don't want to hear, oh, no babies or, oh, you must be pregnant. Like, I don't want to do that anymore. So learning how to set boundaries genuinely, I think, has been the biggest, most impactful thing when it comes to people pleasing. And it's not an easy thing to do. Boundaries are really hard and complicated, and most people aren't receptive to boundaries because nobody likes to be told that they're doing something hurtful, because most people don't intend to do something hurtful. When I have the conversation with my mom saying, it really bothers me when you ask me about kids, she's not doing that to bother me. She's doing that because she's genuinely attached to being a grandmother and is hopeful that one day I'm going to have children. So when you say, I need you to stop doing that because it hurts me, most people become defensive because that was never their intent. They don't want to hurt the people that they love. But having that conversation was super important because she stopped asking me those questions anymore. She removed that pressure from me, which allowed me to be more myself rather than tiptoeing around the conversation and saying, maybe one day, or I might one day, or who knows, just to not have a deeper conversation. And then I didn't have to worry about that every time I went to family events. So yeah, I think knowing my worth and understanding my value as a human being and what I bring to the table has allowed me to be less of a people pleaser, and then setting boundaries in spaces where having those conversations are needed, whether that's about my diet or my relationship or whether or not I'm going to have children, or whether or not I'm going to and now that I live in the online space, whether I'm going to talk about things or I'm going to share certain things or where I'm going to place value on my platform. Setting boundaries has come in handy, but yeah, they're tricky. They can be
Well, and
really,
I'm
really,
curious
really, really,
because
really tricky.
you share so much on social, right? And so I'm curious and you don't even have to talk about what they are if you don't want, but I'm like, are there things that I'm going to say almost like safeguard, and you're like, no, these are things that I don't talk about on social? Or are you, for the most part, an open book? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I think for the most part, I am an open book. I don't have, again, going with authenticity being a pillar, I don't want to shy. My boundaries online are a little bit more, are much bigger than my family's boundaries. So I think for me, it's like, I don't share my nephew's face. I don't talk about my sister's place of work. I don't show, like, there's certain things that Scott's not comfortable talking about online. So I think I do, for me, my boundaries are open, but I do a really good job of looking after other people's boundaries in my online space. Necessarily, boundaries for me more so come from, like, I don't share GoFundMe's on my page for a few reasons. One, I don't like to play God, and it's unfair for me to do that. When I'm getting 50 requests for GoFundMe's to be shared a week, and then you're asking me to pick and choose which ones I think are more valuable than the other, I don't do that. And that's for my mental health.
You guys know that CJ and I are big advocates for taking care of your mental health, and we both have different ways that we like to do that. One way for me that's really important is going to therapy. Nick and I were just chatting about this morning and realized that I have been making going to therapy a priority for the past 6 years. We actually both go now and have found it to be life-changing for us individually and also in our lives as a couple. If you're like me and you want to prioritize therapy, then listen up. If you listened to episode 35, then you heard our conversation with Ashley Breland, known as the Boundary Therapist on Instagram. Ashley is the founder of Breland Counseling and Support. Breland Counseling is a team of social workers that offer therapeutic services to residents of Saskatchewan via in-office, at-home, virtual phone, and walk-in talks. Their mission is to support folks to stand in their own power and to recognize and acknowledge their strengths and abilities so they can move forward in a way that feels good and safe. They have social workers who specialize in youth, postpartum, perinatal loss, and couples counseling. You can find Breland Counseling and Support on Instagram at Breland Counseling. That's BRELAND COUNSELLING, and online at brelandcounseling.ca, where you can book in online with the team and find the type of session that supports you best. We'll link all the information in our show notes for you to easily find.
I've shared them and they've turned out to not be a valid GoFundMe, and my followers and people who work really hard for their money are giving it to a space because they trust me, and then it turns out to be not the thing. So that's a boundary I set right away to say I don't share GoFundMes in my space, because I have to give my mental health priority over sifting through 50 tragic stories every single week and then deciding which ones I share, because I can't share all 50. Because if you're a content creator, you understand that if I share all 50, well, then one of my pillars then becomes GoFundMe's. Mm-hmm. And then people who are there for these 5 pillars are now having those 5 pillars diluted by something that's not longer interested in them. And I'm going to lose people from these 5 pillars, which is going to make my impact on these things far less anyways. So it's like this juggling game. So, and then like other boundaries that I would have is like talking about or being malicious in my space. That's a boundary for me. Like, you're not going to talk about me like I'm not a human being on my platform. That's a boundary. And if you break that boundary, then I will block you from my space. If you're not respectful to the other people in my space, that's a boundary, and I will. So most of my boundaries online now have to do with protecting my the people that are within my space and my mental health mostly. But everything I share, I'm pretty much open book when it comes to that stuff.
That makes sense. I have another question, and it's silly, and more selfish, I guess, but I'm very curious, for someone who has, I believe it's over 6 million followers, right? Across all of your platforms, could be more.
6 million on TikTok and 1 million on Instagram.
Okay, amazing. 7 million. Yeah. Like, how much time are you physically spending on your phone and on these platforms?
A lot. Yeah. A lot of time. But again, I refuse to feel, I think there's this stigma that comes along with being on our phones, because the majority of people aren't working from their phones, or their job doesn't revolve around their social media. I am a business. This is my small business. And if this was a shop and I was pulling all-nighters in my shop, or to get the work done, or I slept in my shop, or I was spending more time in packaging things and sending things, you would think I was a hard worker for spending that time there. Like, I'm really bought into my brand and my product. And that is the same for my phone for me. So I do spend a lot of time on my space, because there's lots of spaces within the internet to be. I can be doing my emails, I can be answering DMs, I can be commenting on photos, I can be creating content, I can be watching content, I can be on TikTok, and all of that falls within the realm of all of the different platforms. So I do spend a lot of time on social media. However, I am very good at spending time on myself when I need to spend time on myself. And that's kind of where I've done a good job of like protecting my like my skincare routine or like whatever it is to give myself a break. But yeah, I spend a lot of time.
I'm just curious if you and Scott have had to like set up any boundaries with work and with online, and or if you want to say boundaries or whatever, like however you as a couple have entered into this space and have found CJ and I hate the word balance, like we hate it, or like there's no balance in life, it's ebb and flow, but just wondering how you navigated that together.
It's been a big learning curve for both of us because I am an extrovert and Scott by nature is an introvert. And when you choose to share yourself authentically and obnoxiously online, that very much is an extroverted thing when you're sharing intimate points of your relationship or your life. So we've never been better at communicating than we are now because of the last, 4 years of changes that have happened to us, because I always have to look for consent. Are you okay with this? This is the concept I'm submitting. Are you okay with being a part of this? Do you want to go to this? Yeah. And like now there's events and things that we're going to. So I'm constantly having to be like, where's your battery at? Like, are you at 50%? Are you at 100%? Are you at 0? Which event are you going to sit out? And me being mindful of not taking that to heart and like understanding that like he has to set those boundaries for his own self and I have to be receptive to that on the other hand. So it's taken a lot of compromise. That is the word that I like versus balance. It is genuinely taken a lot of compromise, and I think in a relationship sometimes someone compromises more than the other, and that is just how it works depending on where you're at or what you're doing or what that looks like. But he will tell me. That's what I think I like the most, is that he'll be like, you gotta get off your phone, or you can't be doing that, or it that's not the way we used to be, which I think I appreciate more about what has come over the last 4 years for us, is that we not would bottle things up, but we would just let things go and not talk about it. And not that it caused an issue, but we've been able to be much more successful as a couple now, actually having conversations about the things that bother us than just letting them go and not talking about them. But I guess for me, like consent is probably the biggest thing for both of us, is just like, what is he consenting to being a part of online? Where can he show up when his battery is full, and when can, and making sure that he's comfortable to tell me no, so that I am not upset or annoyed, or like just making sure that my reaction to that is something that validates how he feels, because that's important. But as for like being on your phone, I try not to. Our safe space is the car. So like driving, we'll go for drives, listen to music. That is the space where I'm not supposed to be on my phone. So I'm not working when we're driving. And that's kind of always been our thing since he was 16 and got his license, is that we would go for drives. And so anytime we get up to go for a drive, my phone's off. But like when we're sitting on the couch and doing stuff, like he's on his phone too, and he understands and like respects that I'm working from anywhere. But yeah, I mean, who wants to answer their DMs from an office space when you can answer your DMs from the comfort of your couch? Or like that's why I
or with
why I do this job. And like at the first, like I get, like the best part is being able to be naked editing content in my bed. Like that is why I do this. Is this so valuable to me? So yeah, I mean, it's helped us be a little bit more clearer in what we need from each other, which I can appreciate. But I guess consent is the biggest thing that's changed for us. And then just being mindful of each other's like social batteries and what we can expect. And then the car is like a no-go for me. Like, no, can't be on my phone, especially since he does most of the driving. So he will like pull the car over and I'll be like, oh shit, sorry. My bad.
That's hilarious. I feel like the car is like the one place, because I have 4 kids, and I'm like, I feel like that's the one place I'm like, Mom, like it's to work. Everyone listen to the music. Yeah. And I'm like sitting there trying to, I'm like, we got 20 minutes. What can I get done? But I do appreciate that. And I think it's great that you can speak to the fact that there is compromise. And I like what you said about relationships, how there's just sometimes compromise looks different. I think when we get married, we get fed this whole like 50-50 stuff. And I'm like, it is not 50-50. My husband's
it's
a farmer.
100%. It's 100%. And
Yes.
at different points in your life, someone will take on 70 while the other person takes on 30. Sometimes it will be 50-50. Sometimes you're going to run into times where when I lost my job, I was fucking 20% of, and he was 80. And that came to paying the bills and to showing up, and like that was just how it works. But I'll never doubt, and I never doubt that together we're not going to put together the 100%, because that's how a relationship works. But yeah, that 50-50 is trash. Like there's no 50-50 is just such a shitty way to view it, because then when you go through shitty things, it's like, well, you're not pulling your weight. It's like, no, we're in this together. And sometimes you're going to have to help me pull my weight because I can't get through it myself. And it creates far less hostility when you know that you just got to get to 100 together. Like that's it. We just got to get to 100 together. And there's far more appreciation for that than pulling the load alone, or, you know, and it, yeah, we're very lucky in a sense that we've had a lot of time together before my platform blew up, before we had money, before we had no debt, before we've had the luxury that we have now. We've had so much time before that where we were grinding to pay bills, we were putting groceries back, where we weren't able to pay rent. Like we've had so much in our history that now communicating and going through this stuff, I just know, like it's 100% together. We just figure out how to where we need it.
You've touched on mental health, and you've also said at one point here, like, you know, your makeup, your skincare routine. Would you be willing to share what self-care looks like for you?
Yeah. Self-care for me is consuming content from people who make me feel adequate as I am right now. It is a good skincare routine, and I'm not talking a 1-step, I'm talking a 10-step to yourself in a bathroom with products that you love.
I'm like, you gotta just, we can't go like fully there, or maybe we can, but I'm like, give us like your top 2 or 3 products that you're loving right now.
So I'm obsessed with Tula skincare, and like if you've never tried Tula skincare, you're missing out. It is like, it's clean. I have like a mix skin, oily, dry, and some days it's oily, sometimes it just depends on the season and on the day. And Tula skincare has just been like a dream for me. But their 24/7 moisturizer is probably my faves. Every morning, every night I put that on. They have this glow and get it under eye stick, which has like a little shimmer.
Is it
you
pink?
just swipe. Yes.
I have it.
Just swipe. Yeah, that you just swipe under your eye, and it has a cooling effect. So like throughout the summers when I wasn't putting like a lot of makeup on, I toss my moisturizer on and just swipe underneath, and it just gives you like a nice bright under eye. And we'll go the moisturizer, the under eye stick, and probably the probably their vitamin B serum. It's just like a vitamin B serum that I put on before my moisturizer, and my skin just loves it. And yeah, I get so many compliments on my skin care, or like on my skin, and I'm like, that's because at the age of 32 I finally decided to adopt a skincare routine finally. But yeah, so following people that make me feel adequate, a good skincare routine. And I mean, it doesn't have to be skincare for everybody, but I genuinely mean like protecting a period of time, like 15 to 20 minutes, where you're just focused on yourself. Some people that's a bath, some people that's their shower, some people that's their cardio, whatever it is, where you're just you, or sitting down to read a book, something that every single day you have 15 to 20 minutes for yourself. And I know that sounds like, oh, 15 to 20 minutes, that's not a lot, but I assure you that I'm sure a lot of people are struggling to think about when the last time is they stopped for 15 to 20 minutes and focused on just themselves, especially those that have kids or a really busy job. And it's just, sometimes it's hard. That's self-care to me. And then prioritizing my mental health every chance I get. I suffered from my very first seasonal depression 2 years ago. As I am living my best life, my career has blown up. I am the happiest that I could ever be. I have more money than I've ever had in my life. I have no debt. I am truly joyful, I am the saddest I have ever been. And I truly did not understand depression or seasonal depression until I was no longer in my seasonal depression, and it was too late. I was out of it and I was like, holy shit, I just lost 6 months of my life. My content changed, how I interacted with others changed, my business changed. Um, and I truly underestimated the impact that, although I was doing something that I loved and I was in a very depression doesn't give two flying fucks about where you're at in life or how happy you are. Or I had gone from working a traditional like 8 to 4 with hundreds of people around all of the time to being a content creator where my husband would leave in the morning and go to work and I would be alone by myself during the day. And like, alone sounds silly when you have 7 million people, but it's different. And it's like a very, very isolating, a very hard position, privileged but hard position to be in, because you can't talk about feeling sad when you're doing well. And I say you can't because most people don't, and you can, and I urge people to do it, but it's a lot harder than people make it out to be. um my life had been basically uprooted in the best possible way, and then we went on a trip that I was talking about, taking my friends to Vegas, and we got outside and it was like this switch. All of a sudden I just felt joy. And then my therapist was like, yeah, that's called seasonal depression, and that's truly how it works. Like, you go into this darkness and then one day you're out and the sun comes out again and things start to change and you're just happy again. And I was like, well, I never want to ever fucking do that ever again. Like, I never want to see the depths of that darkness and how I felt ever again. So last year, Scott and I sat down, and like, this was probably the biggest compromise that Scott has ever had to make in his entire life and for me. And I said, I'm not staying here for the month of March. I was like, I need to leave. I can't be in this province. I can't be by myself. I was like, you're either coming with me or you're staying here. Like, that's, I'm no hard feelings either way, but I can't be here alone. So you either have to quit your traditional job during the day and come with me, or ask for time off, or whatever that looks like for you, or you stay here and I go. And he quit and he came with me, and we were in LA for 6 weeks. We were in California and rented an Airbnb for 6 weeks from the end of February to the first week in April. And it was the best decision I ever made for my mental health. The best decision. I could cry thinking about how much of a different person I was, because I chose to spend the money on my mental health, because I chose to prioritize that, because I chose to sit down and have that tough conversation with him to say, like, I can't be here and be sad. And we're going to do that again this year. And because it's just, I got up every day. I walked to the beach. I worked out. We had breakfast together. For the first time in 17 years we've been together, we got up at the same time and had breakfast. And like, it just completely altered my chemistry for that period of time. And I understand that that's a grand gesture and that's not something that everybody can do at all times. But there are little things that I could have been doing for myself that I truly didn't, and things that I have done this year that are a lot bigger than that, like talking to a therapist, like speaking to somebody on a regular basis to help with my mental health, to being very open and honest with my partner about how I'm feeling, because the first year I wasn't, by saying no to things when I don't feel like I have the capacity to do them, by challenging my no's when I say no sometimes, because sometimes it's the depression saying no and not me saying no, and challenging myself to get out of my comfort zone for certain things by changing my sleep schedule and prioritizing my sleep. Those things didn't and don't cost a lot of money, but they're things and they're choices that I did not make for myself the first year that I suffered with my depression. So yeah, those would probably be my biggest three. Just cultivating my social media, spending time on myself, and then doing everything I possibly can within my power to make sure that my mental health is always the priority, because I can't give to others and be the person who I want to be if I am not myself. And like, have learned that the hard way. But yeah, so those are probably my top 3.
That's so great, Alicia. Honestly, I love all of those. And I think, whether you're sitting here right now and you're like, well, Alicia, like, I can't go to LA. I think what you're really trying to get across is to prioritize it in the capacity that you're able to. And so 100%. I just want to say thank you for that. And thank you for like hanging out with us today. I'm looking at the time and I'm like, oh my gosh, we can't take up any more of your amazing time. We do like to wrap up our podcast always by asking our guests if they'd be willing to share their favorite piece of advice that they've ever been given or that they like to share with others.
I think my favorite piece of advice that I've ever gotten as a human, as a content creator, is when my platform first started blowing up, I was stuck in this place of like really like getting hung up on what other people were saying about me and how they viewed me or the clothing that I wore or what I chose to do. And I'll never forget my mom saying to me, some days you don't care what I think about you. So how do you care about what a stranger on the internet thinks about you? And I was like, shit, how do I like rebuttal to that? Cause I can't, because if my mom, who has me always at the front of her brain, who wants me to be successful, who cares about who I am, who loves me more than probably anybody on the planet, can give me her feedback and I'm like, you're silly. Like, I'm not going to take that. How could I possibly hold the opinions of strangers who don't care about me like she does, who don't love me the way she does, who don't want me to be successful the way that she does, higher than hers ever at any day? How could I ever do that? And I think that really put into perspective how much power we have as a person on what we allow to hold value in our lives. And it's always our choice. Sometimes it's harder than others. Some days there's rough days, but we truly always have a choice to who we give the power of opinion in our lives. And I think sometimes we need to be a little bit more strategic over that and really understand, like, where is this coming from? Who is this coming from? Do they care about me? Do they love me? Do they want me to be successful? And if the answer is no to those questions, then there's a big giant chance that opinion does not matter.
Well, that's such a beautiful way to put it, because we always say, like, why do we care about the opinions of strangers? But I think really putting it into context and being like, someone that you love and loves you, you can be like, nah, I'm not going to take that advice, So I really appreciate the way that you painted that picture. I think a lot of people obviously know where to find you and follow you, but we always want to be able to shout you out. And so I'd love for you to give us the places that we can find you online, on socials, and anything that you're currently wanting to bring attention to as well. Feel free to shout that out.
Yeah, you can find me on Instagram and TikTok at Alicia Mccarvell. And I don't really have a ton going. Well, I have a lot going on behind the scenes, but nothing that I'm announcing just yet. So, but there's tuned. Lots to come. There's lots to come in 2024. So 2024 is going to be my year of choice. So choosing what's best for me, choosing what's and allowing the people in my community to choose what's best for them. So a lot of my collaborations are very open and people get to choose between a few things for them and whatever works best for their lives. So I'm kind of excited about that.
Well, now you got me all excited too. I love shopping. You're like, and one of these, and one of these. Erica doesn't need a choice. Just send her everything.
There will be
take the whole package.
Yeah. Well, we absolutely appreciate you taking the time, sharing with us, and bringing such a beautiful energy, not only to the podcast, but to the event that you came to in Saskatoon and also your platform. Just thank you so much for everything you do.
Thank you for having me. It means so much.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us on this episode of the Her Podcast. If you want to follow along with us, you can find us on Instagram and TikTok at its.her.podcast. We can't wait to see you there.